My uncle said I was a disgrace to the family until I found his missing daughter alive. Uncle Greg had always made it clear I was the family disappointment. While my cousins became doctors and lawyers, I dropped out of college to work construction. Every family gathering, he'd make some comment about my life choices, how I was wasting my potential, how I'd never amount to anything. His daughter Emma had been missing for 3 years. She disappeared at 19 during her sophomore year at college, vanished from her dorm room with no trace. The police investigation went nowhere. No leads, no suspects, no evidence of foul play. Just gone. The family had given up hope months ago, but Uncle Greg still posted on social media every week, sharing her picture and begging for information. He'd hired 2 different private investigators who both came up empty. Last Christmas, he looked at me with disgust and said I was too lazy and worthless to even help look for his daughter. That comment stuck with me. 3 weeks ago, I started spending my free time driving through nearby towns, showing Emma's picture to gas station clerks and restaurant workers. I figured maybe fresh eyes might notice something everyone else had missed. Most people just shook their heads and said they'd never seen her. But on Tuesday, something weird happened. I stopped at a diner in Millbrook, about 2 hours from where Emma went missing. The waitress, an older woman named Diane, looked at the photo for a long time. She seemed nervous and kept glancing toward the kitchen. Finally, she said Emma looked familiar, but she wasn't sure. When I pressed her for details, she said there was a girl who used to work dishwashing shifts who looked similar, but that was months ago. Diane mentioned the girl always seemed scared and never talked to anyone. She'd show up for work with bruises sometimes, claiming she'd fallen or walked into doors. The girl had quit suddenly one night without giving notice, leaving behind a jacket with Emma's initials sewn inside the collar. I asked if she remembered the girl's name, but Diane said she'd been paid cash under the table and never gave her real information, just called herself Sarah. When I showed the photo to the cook, he got angry and said he didn't want any trouble, that some questions were better left unanswered. That response felt wrong, like he knew something but was afraid to say it. I started calling other businesses in the area, asking if anyone remembered a young woman matching Emma's description working odd jobs for cash. Most places hung up on me, but I found 3 more businesses where people remembered a scared girl named Sarah who'd worked briefly before disappearing again. Always paid in cash, always seemed terrified, always left without warning when certain customers came around. The pattern was strange, like someone was moving her from place to place, keeping her hidden but close enough that people might see her. Each location was within a 30-mile radius, all small towns where nobody asked too many questions about temporary workers. I drove back to Millbrook yesterday and parked across from the diner, watching for hours. Around 8 p.m., I saw Diane leave through the back door and walk to a small house behind the restaurant. I waited until midnight, then crept around to look through the windows. In the back bedroom, I saw someone sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Even in the dark, I recognized the shape of her face. It was definitely Emma, but she wasn't being held prisoner like I'd expected. She was curled up next to someone else in the bed, and when I looked closer, I realized who it was. That's when I understood why Uncle Greg had been so desperate to find her, and why he'd been calling me a disgrace for not helping with the search. The person sleeping next to his missing daughter was Uncle Greg himself. My hands are shaking as I pull out my phone and take several photos of Uncle Greg curled up next to Emma. The flash is off, but I'm still terrified he'll wake up. Each picture feels like a bomb I'm arming. Evidence of something so twisted I can barely process it. I back away from the window, stumbling in the dark until I reach my car. Once inside, I lock the doors and call 911, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to report a kidnapping. I've found my cousin who's been missing for 3 years. The dispatcher asks me to stay on the line while officers are dispatched. I give them the address and describe what I've seen. When she asks if Emma appears to be in immediate danger, I hesitate. She's asleep, but she's with the man who kidnapped her, my uncle, her father. I can hear the confusion in the dispatcher's voice, but she remains professional, telling me officers are 5 minutes out. She instructs me to remain in my vehicle and not approach the house again. The police arrive with surprising silence. No sirens, just flashing lights that paint the street in rhythmic bursts of blue and red. 4 officers approach the house while one stays with me, taking my statement. I show him the photos on my phone, and his expression hardens. You're saying that's your uncle, the girl's father? I nod. He's been pretending to search for her for 3 years, but he's the one who took her. The officer radios his colleagues, who position themselves around the house before knocking forcefully on the front door. I watch from the safety of the patrol car, heart hammering in my chest. Minutes later, they bring Uncle Greg out in handcuffs. He's shouting, red-faced with rage, claiming they've made a terrible mistake. When he spots me in the police car, his expression transforms into something inhuman, pure hatred that makes me shrink back against the seat. You? He roars. You did this? After everything I've done for this family? 2 officers struggle to get him into a patrol car, while he continues shouting about how he was rescuing his daughter, how no one understands. Emma emerges next, supported between 2 officers. She's stumbling, disoriented, her eyes unfocused. Even from a distance, I can tell she's been drugged. My stomach turns when I realize what that means. Uncle Greg keeping her sedated, helpless. At the hospital, the family begins to arrive in waves of shock and disbelief. My parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all gathering in the waiting room while Emma undergoes examination and treatment. The police take statements from everyone, piecing together the horrifying truth. Emma's room is guarded by an officer. When they finally allow family members to see her, I hang back, unsure if she'll even recognize me after all this time. But when she spots me in the doorway, her eyes widen with recognition. You found me, she says, her voice hoarse. You actually found me. I move closer to her bed, noticing how thin she is, how pale. I'm so sorry it took so long. She shakes her head. He was so careful, always moving me when I tried to escape. The detective in the room steps forward, notebook ready. Emma, can you tell us what happened? And so the nightmare unfolds. Emma explains how Uncle Greg had been obsessed with her since her mother died when she was 16, how he'd started showing up at her college campus, watching her from a distance, how one night he'd appeared at her dorm room, claiming there was a family emergency. He drugged me in the car, she says, her voice hollow. When I woke up, we were in a different state. He told everyone I'd run away, that I was troubled after Mom died. Each time she tried to escape, he'd move her to a new location, a new job, always cash payments, always using the name Sarah, always watching. Diane was paid to keep me at her place, Emma continues. $500 a week. She knew who I was. She knew. My Aunt Catherine breaks down sobbing, clinging to Emma's hand. We should have known. We should have seen something was wrong with him. The police inform us that Uncle Greg is facing multiple felony charges: kidnapping, false imprisonment, drugging her, identity fraud. The list keeps growing as more evidence emerges. That night, as most of the family finally leaves the hospital, I stay behind. Emma asks me to sit with her, afraid to be alone. How did you figure it out, she asks, when everyone else believed his lies? I tell her about my search, about the pattern I noticed, about Diane's nervous glances and the cook's anger, about how something felt wrong about the whole situation. He hated you, she says suddenly. Did you know that? He would talk about you all the time, how you were the only one who might figure it out because you didn't respect him like everyone else did. I almost laugh at the irony. He was right about that part. Emma's eyes grow heavy as the medication takes effect. Before she drifts off to sleep, she grips my hand tightly. Thank you for not giving up on me. I watch her fall asleep, thinking about how Uncle Greg's disdain for me ultimately led to his downfall. If he hadn't insulted me at Christmas, I might never have started looking. If he hadn't made me feel worthless, I might never have tried to prove my worth by finding Emma. Outside her room, my phone buzzes with notifications. News outlets have picked up the story. Local stations are reporting on the shocking family abduction and the hero cousin who cracked the case. I turn off my phone, not wanting any part of that narrative. This isn't about heroism. It's about a family that failed to see the monster in their midst, and a girl who lost 3 years of her life because of it. Tomorrow, we'll face the media circus. Tomorrow, the family will have to confront uncomfortable truths about Uncle Greg. Tomorrow, Emma begins the long journey of healing. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she sleeps in safety, knowing that when she wakes up, she'll be free. The story explodes overnight. By morning, Emma's face is on every local news station, and by noon, the national media descends on our small town like locusts. I watch from Emma's hospital room as reporters camp outside, their satellite trucks creating a small village in the parking lot. They're calling you a hero, Emma says, scrolling through news articles on her phone. The doctors have reduced her medication, and clarity has returned to her eyes, though they still hold a haunted look I suspect will take years to fade. I shrug uncomfortably. I just did what anyone would do. No, she says firmly, not anyone. The rest of the family believed his lies for 3 years. The family, that's become a complicated term in the past 24 hours. They arrive in shifts throughout the day, divided into clear factions. Those who support Emma unconditionally, those who can't reconcile the monster with the man they thought they knew, and those who unbelievably think there must be some explanation for Uncle Greg's actions. Aunt Catherine leads the first group, barely leaving Emma's side. Uncle Robert and his wife represent the second, stopping by with flowers and awkward silences. The third group, smaller but vocal, is led by Uncle Greg's brother, who keeps insisting there's more to the story, and that Greg must have had his reasons. I avoid them all, slipping out whenever they arrive, finding excuses to be elsewhere. The detective handling the case catches me in the hallway during one such escape. We need to talk about what happens next, she says, guiding me to a quiet corner. Emma's starting to share details about her captivity. The detective's face is carefully neutral, but I can see the tension in her jaw. It's worse than we initially thought. Your uncle was methodical. He drugged her food regularly, monitored her constantly, and punished escape attempts by moving her farther from home each time. My stomach turns. How did he explain his absences when he was with her? Business trips. He scheduled them around the search efforts he organized himself. She shakes her head in disgust. He'd leave Emma locked up, return to play the devastated father searching for his daughter, then go back to her. The perfect alibi. That afternoon, while Emma sleeps, I drive to Uncle Greg's house. The police have finished processing it as a crime scene, and Aunt Catherine gave me the spare key. I'm not entirely sure why I'm here. Closure? Maybe? Or answers to questions I haven't fully formed yet. The house is eerily normal at first glance. Family photos on the walls, including many of Emma. A half-finished cup of coffee still sits on the kitchen counter. But there's an undercurrent of wrongness that makes my skin crawl. I head to his office, where the police focused most of their attention. The desk drawers hang open, contents partially removed. I'm not sure what I'm looking for until I find it a false bottom in the lowest drawer, revealed by the hasty police search. Inside is a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. I should call the detective. I know this. Instead, I sit in Uncle Greg's chair and open the journal. The entries start 6 months before Emma's mother died. What begins as seemingly innocent observations about Emma's activities quickly devolves into something sickening. He records her routines, her friends, her favorite places. He describes her physical appearance in ways that make me slam the book shut, breathing hard. When I can stomach it again, I skip ahead. The entries after her disappearance are triumphant, possessive. He writes about saving her from the world, about how she belongs with him. He details the methods he used to keep her compliant, the drugs, the isolation, the psychological manipulation. Most disturbing are the entries about the family, about me. He writes about how he convinced everyone I was unreliable, how he subtly undermined my credibility for years. There's an entry from 5 years ago where he admits to sabotaging my college applications by calling admissions offices as a concerned uncle to share fabricated concerns about my character. I think of all the rejections, the confusion when schools that had shown interest suddenly went silent, the way the family viewed me as the disappointment, the dropout, while my cousins became doctors and lawyers. The USB drive contains photos, hundreds of them. Emma at high school, at college, walking between classes, all taken with a telephoto lens, evidence of stalking that predated her disappearance by years. I find a folder labeled Lisa Evidence containing emails between Emma's mother and her friend. In them, Lisa expresses concern about Greg's attention toward Emma, about how he seems fixated on her in ways that make Lisa uncomfortable. The last email is dated 3 weeks before Lisa's fatal car accident. My phone rings. It's Aunt Catherine. The family has gathered at her house. Emma is there, released from the hospital on condition she stays with relatives. They want me to come. When I arrive, the tension is thick enough to choke on. I've brought the journal and USB drive, which I hand to the detective who's also present. She takes them with a grim nod. I found these hidden in Greg's office, I explain to the room. There's evidence that Emma's mom suspected something was wrong years ago. The silence that follows is deafening. Then Emma's voice. Small but steady. Mom told me once to be careful around him. I thought she was being overprotective. Uncle Robert stands abruptly. This is insane. Greg loved Lisa. He wouldn't. He followed me for months before he took me. Emma interrupts. He knew my schedule, my friends, everything. And after he had me, he'd leave me locked up while he came back here to pretend to search for me. The detective clears her throat. We've confirmed Emma's account through electronic evidence. Mr. Thornhill's phone GPS places him in all the locations Emma described, matching the timeline perfectly. Aunt Catherine breaks down sobbing. We trusted him. We let him lead the search efforts. All those vigils, those press conferences, he was playing us all. I think about Uncle Greg's face on the local news, pleading for information about his missing daughter, the fundraisers he organized for search efforts, the way he'd break down crying at family gatherings when Emma's name was mentioned. All while she was locked away, drugged and terrified, just a 2-hour drive from home. The family meeting dissolves into chaos after that accusations, denials, grief. I slip outside to the porch, needing air. Emma finds me there 10 minutes later. Thank you, she says simply, sitting beside me, for believing in me when no one else did. I think about the journal entries, about Uncle Greg's systematic campaign to discredit me. Maybe he did me a favor. I say, if he hadn't made me the family disappointment, I might never have tried so hard to prove myself by finding you. Emma leans her head against my shoulder. What happens now? I don't have an answer. The media will keep calling. The trial will be a circus. The family may never recover from this betrayal, but Emma is free, and for now, that's enough. We take it one day at a time, I tell her, and for the first time since I found her, she smiles. The prison visiting room smells like industrial cleaner and desperation. Uncle Greg sits across from me, separated by a scratched plexiglass barrier, looking nothing like the confident man who once lectured me about ambition. His face is gaunt, prison jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame. The arrogance has been replaced by something hollow, something broken. You came, he says, voice crackling through the phone receiver. His eyes dart around nervously before settling on me. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I admit. The metal chair digs into my back as I lean forward. But I have questions only you can answer. He nods slowly, running a hand through his unkempt hair. How is she? Emma's alive. That's about the best I can say right now. I watch his face for a reaction, for some sign of remorse. The doctors say the drugs you gave her will take time to fully leave her system. I was protecting her, he says, the familiar self-righteousness creeping back into his voice. You don't understand what she was getting involved with at college. The people she was hanging around with. The decisions she was making. So you drugged her and kept her prisoner for 3 years? My voice rises, earning a warning glance from the guard. That's not protection, Greg. That's obsession. His eyes narrow at my use of his first name instead of uncle. You've always been disrespectful. Always thought you knew better than everyone else. Quote, I was also staken my classry. Is that why you sabotaged me? I ask bluntly. Is that why you called my colleges and told them lies about me? The question catches him off guard. His mouth opens, closes, then opens again. You found out about that. I found your journal. Everything's in there. How you stalked Emma, how you manipulated the family, how you systematically destroyed my reputation because you were afraid I'd figure out what you did. He looks down at his hands, which are trembling slightly. You were too smart for your own good. Always watching, always questioning. I couldn't risk you getting close to the truth. So you made me the family disappointment, the dropout, the failure. Each word tastes bitter on my tongue. You stole my future because I made you nervous. I did what I had to do to protect Emma, he insists. But the conviction in his voice is wavering. She needed me. Her mother never understood our bond. Her mother suspected you were obsessed with her daughter. I counter. The emails we found suggest she was planning to keep Emma away from you before she died. Was her car accident really an accident, Greg? His face pales, and for a moment, I see genuine fear in his eyes. That's not. I would never. The police are reopening the investigation into Lisa's death, I say. watching him closely. They found some inconsistencies in the original report. He slumps in his chair, suddenly looking every day of his 54 years. I loved Lisa. I would never hurt her. Like you'd never hurt Emma? I lean closer to the glass. You destroyed her life. Do you have any idea what she's going through now? The nightmares? The panic attacks? The trust issues? I saved her, he shouts suddenly, slamming his palm against the plexiglass. The guard steps forward, but Greg waves him off, lowering his voice. I saved her from making mistakes that would ruin her life. No, you ruined her life to fulfill your sick fantasy of owning her. I feel disgust rising in my throat. And you ruined mine because I was a threat to that fantasy. He's quiet for a long moment, staring at some point beyond my shoulder. I did spread rumors about you, he finally admits. I told your aunt you were using drugs. I told your cousins you cheated on exams. I made sure everyone thought you were unreliable. The confirmation of what I already knew still hits like a physical blow. Why? What did I ever do to you? You reminded me of Lisa, he says quietly. The way you questioned things, the way you looked at me sometimes, like you could see right through me. I couldn't risk it. I sit back, processing this. Emma's therapy session started yesterday. She came home to Aunt Catherine's house afterward and curled up on the couch, staring at the wall for hours. The therapist warned us it would get worse before it got better, that Emma would need to confront the trauma before she could begin to heal. She's seeing a therapist, I tell him. She's starting to remember everything you did to her. Something flickers across his face, fear, maybe, or shame. I only wanted what was best for her. Whined. No, you wanted her for yourself. I stand up, done with his excuses. The police found other evidence in your home office, photos of other young women. Were they just practice runs, Greg? Was Emma just the one you finally decided to take? He doesn't answer, but his silence tells me everything I need to know. Emma asked me to help her contact some of her old college friends, I say. They thought she abandoned them. They're coming to visit next week. They'll fill her head with normal college experiences, with friendship, with all the things you stole from her. I cut him off. That's the point. I turn to leave, but his desperate voice stops me. The family will understand eventually. They'll see I was right. I look back at him, this pathetic shell of a man who once terrorized me. There's a family meeting tonight. Emma will be there. So will the detective, with your journal and those photos. No one's going to understand, Greg. They're going to see you for exactly what you are. The drive to Aunt Catherine's house is quiet. I rehearse what I'll say to the family, how I'll present the evidence without traumatizing Emma further. But when I arrive, the scene is already chaotic. Uncle Robert is red-faced, shouting at Uncle Greg's brother. He confessed. What more do you need to hear? He's confused. They've got him on medication in there, Uncle Richard shouts back. Emma sits silently in an armchair, watching the argument unfold with vacant eyes. Aunt Catherine stands behind her, hands protectively on her shoulders. Enough, I shout, silencing the room. This isn't helping Emma. The detective who interviewed me at the hospital steps forward. I've brought copies of some of the evidence we've recovered, she says calmly. I think it's important for the family to understand the extent of Gregory's actions. She lays out photocopies of journal entries, careful to exclude the most disturbing passages. She shows them the timeline of Emma's captivity, the detailed plans Greg made to isolate her, the methods he used to keep her compliant. He drugged her food, Aunt Catherine whispers, horror dawning on her face. All those times he insisted on bringing her meals himself. There's more, the detective says carefully. We've identified at least 3 other young women Gregory was stalking before he took Emma. We're contacting them now to ensure their safety. The silence that follows is deafening. Then Emma's Aunt Julia, who has been quiet until now, speaks up. I suspected something wasn't right years ago, she says, her voice shaking. The way he looked at her at her 16th birthday party. I told Lisa about it, and she said she'd noticed it too. Why didn't you say anything to the rest of us? Uncle Robert demands. Because Lisa died 3 weeks later, Julia says, tears streaming down her face, and everyone was so focused on supporting Greg and Emma that it seemed cruel to bring up my suspicions. Emma stands suddenly, her voice stronger than I've heard it since finding her. He killed her, she says. My mom. She was going to take me away from him. She told me we were moving to California after my semester ended. 3 days later, she was dead. The detective's expression is carefully neutral, but I can see the calculation in her eyes. We're reviewing the accident investigation, she says simply. The family meeting continues late into the night, fracturing along new lines as people process their guilt, their disbelief, their horror at what happened under their noses. Some leave in tears, unable to face the truth. Others stay, gathering around Emma like a protective shield. Later, as most of the family has gone, Emma and I sit on the porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. Thank you for visiting him, she says quietly. I couldn't face him yet. I needed answers, I reply, for both of us. Did you get them? I think about Uncle Greg's hollow eyes, his pathetic justifications, his admission of sabotaging my life, some of them. Enough to know it wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. She nods slowly, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm evening. The therapist says, I need to reconnect with my old life, the one he stole from me. Your friends are coming next week, I remind her. That's a start. Will you stay? She asks, vulnerability clear in her voice. When they come, I don't think I can face them alone. I think about the construction job waiting for me, the apartment I can barely afford, the life I've cobbled together after Greg's systematic destruction of my prospects. None of it matters compared to helping Emma rebuild her life. I'll be right here, I promise, for as long as you need. For the first time since I found her, Emma reaches out and takes my hand, a small gesture of trust that feels like the beginning of something healing. The courthouse steps are crowded with reporters when we arrive. Emma grips my hand tightly as we navigate through the sea of microphones and shouted questions. Aunt Catherine walks ahead of us, creating a path with quiet determination, while Uncle Robert brings up the rear, his hand occasionally touching Emma's shoulder to reassure her that he's still there. "You don't have to look at him," I whisper to Emma as we approach the courtroom doors. "Just focus on the prosecutor and answer the questions." She nods, her face pale but composed. 3 months of intensive therapy have given her tools to manage her anxiety, but nothing could fully prepare her for facing Uncle Greg in court. The courtroom feels unnaturally quiet after the chaos outside. Our family fills the first 2 rows behind the prosecution table, those who chose to support Emma, at least. Uncle Richard and a few others who still cling to disbelief are noticeably absent. When they bring Uncle Greg in, I feel Emma stiffen beside me. He looks diminished in his suit, thinner than when I visited him in jail. His eyes scan the gallery until they find Emma, and something like hunger flashes across his face before his attorney whispers something that makes him look away. "All rise," calls the bailiff, and the trial that will dominate national headlines for the next 3 weeks officially begins. The prosecution's opening statement is devastating in its simplicity. They lay out the timeline of Emma's captivity, the psychological manipulation, the drugging, the multiple relocations to prevent her escape. They show photos of the small houses and apartments where Greg kept her, the false identification documents he created, the records of cash payments to people like Diane who helped keep Emma hidden. This was not the impulsive act of a troubled mind, the prosecutor tells the jury. This was a calculated, long-term plan by a man who believed he had the right to possess his own daughter. Emma testifies on the 3rd day. I sit directly behind her as she walks to the witness stand, her steps steady despite the tremor in her hands. She's chosen to wear a simple blue dress, the first one she bought after being freed, and her hair is pulled back in a ponytail that makes her look younger than her 22 years. For nearly 4 hours, she describes her captivity in a voice that only occasionally wavers. How Greg first drugged her in the car after claiming there was a family emergency. How she woke up in a strange house 2 states away. How he controlled her with a combination of medication, isolation, and psychological manipulation. "He told me no one was looking for me anymore," she says, her eyes fixed on the prosecutor rather than looking at her father. "He showed me fake news articles saying the search had been called off. He said my friends had forgotten me, that the family thought I'd run away because I was troubled." "And did you believe him?" the prosecutor asks gently. "Eventually, yes," Emma's voice catches. "After months of isolation, you start to believe whatever reality is presented to you, especially when you're being drugged." When Greg's attorney cross-examines her, attempting to paint Greg's actions as misguided protection rather than obsessive control, Emma's response silences the courtroom. "If he wanted to protect me, he would have let me live my life. Instead, he stole 3 years that I'll never get back. He took my education, my friendships, my independence. He took everything except my physical life, and some days that felt stolen too." I testify the following day, describing how I found Emma, the pattern of Sarah sightings that led me to Millbrook, and the moment I saw Uncle Greg curled up next to my drugged cousin through Diane's back window. I explain how Greg had systematically undermined my credibility within the family for years, ensuring no one would take my suspicions seriously if I ever developed any. He told everyone I was unreliable, a dropout, a disappointment, I say, meeting Greg's eyes directly for the first time. He sabotaged my college applications by calling admissions offices with lies about my character. He made sure the family saw me as someone whose opinions didn't matter. "And why do you think he did that?" the prosecutor asks. "Because I asked too many questions. Because I didn't worship him like everyone else did. Because he knew if anyone was going to see through his act, it would be me." The defense tries to paint me as resentful, suggesting I fabricated evidence against Greg out of spite for how he treated me. But the prosecutor simply enters Greg's journal into evidence, letting his own words reveal the truth of his campaign against me. The trial lasts 17 days. 17 days of testimony from police officers, forensic experts, psychologists, and family members. 17 days of evidence that builds an irrefutable case against the man who once dominated our family gatherings with his charismatic presence. When the jury returns after just 4 hours of deliberation, no one is surprised by the verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentences Greg to 20 years in prison without possibility of parole for the first 15, plus additional time for identity fraud and drugging Emma, that brings the total to 26 years. As the bailiff leads him away, Greg turns to look at Emma one last time. "I only wanted to keep you safe," he calls out, his voice breaking. "Everything I did was for you." Emma doesn't respond, doesn't even acknowledge his words. She simply turns to me and Aunt Catherine, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "It's over," she whispers. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." The aftermath of the trial brings unexpected changes. Emma moves in with Aunt Catherine and Uncle Robert, who convert their home office into a bedroom decorated with photos of Emma's college friends who have rallied around her since her return. She plans to resume her education in the spring semester, starting with online classes before transitioning back to campus life. As for me, I receive an unexpected email 2 weeks after the trial ends, a scholarship offer from the State University's psychology department, then another from a private college, then 3 more. "They're offering you full rides," Emma says, scrolling through the emails on my phone while we sit on Aunt Catherine's porch swing. "All of them. The story made national news, I remind her. They probably just want the PR of having the hero cousin on campus. She shakes her head. No, look at the dates. These were sent before the verdict, before the media circus. Someone reached out to these schools on your behalf. Later that evening, Aunt Catherine confesses that she contacted every college that rejected me 4 years ago, explaining what Greg had done and providing evidence from his journal about his interference. It was the least I could do, she says, tears in her eyes. We all failed you. We believed his lies about you for years. My parents, who have been unusually quiet throughout the trial, finally come to see me at my apartment. My father, Greg's brother-in-law, looks aged beyond his years as he sits awkwardly on my threadbare couch. We should have known better, he says, staring at his hands. We should have trusted you more than we trusted him. Why didn't you? I ask, the question that's burned inside me for years, finally finding voice. My mother wipes away tears. He was so convincing, so respected, and he told us things about you, problems at school, trouble with friends that seemed to explain why you were struggling. We thought we were helping by believing him. It's not enough. Not yet, but it's a start. I accept the scholarship to State University, choosing it because it's only 30 minutes from Aunt Catherine's house, where Emma is staying. I start classes in the fall, majoring in psychology with a focus on trauma recovery. The construction job becomes part-time weekend work, just enough to cover expenses the scholarship doesn't. Emma and I develop a routine. Sunday dinners at Aunt Catherine's, Tuesday coffee between my classes, Thursday therapy sessions, individual in the morning, joint in the afternoon. The therapist says our shared experience creates a unique bond. Something between friendship and siblinghood, forged in trauma, but not defined by it. You're the only one who really understands, Emma tells me one evening as we walk through campus. She's visiting for the weekend, getting comfortable with the idea of returning to college life. Everyone else tries, but they can't really know what it was like. I only saw the aftermath, I remind her. You lived through it, but you saw through him when no one else did. She stops walking, turning to face me. You know what the therapist said today? That I should think about what I want my life to be now, not what it would have been if this hadn't happened. What do you want it to be? I ask. She looks around at the campus, at the students rushing between classes, at the normal life continuing all around us. I want to help people like me, and I want to make sure people like him don't get away with it again. 1 year after the trial, Emma enrolls in classes at State University. She moves into an apartment near campus with 2 friends from her support group. She calls me whenever the anxiety spikes, whenever a nightmare feels too real, but those calls become less frequent as the months pass. On the anniversary of the day I found her, she shows up at my door with takeout and a small wrapped package. What's this? I ask, turning the box in my hands. Open it, she says, smiling more easily than she could a year ago. Inside is a framed photo of us from last month's family picnic, both of us laughing at something Aunt Catherine said. On the back, Emma has written, "To the person who found me when I was lost, thank you for helping me find myself again." We eat dinner on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma talks about her classes, her new friends, her plans for the summer, normal things, everyday things, the kind of future that seemed impossible a year ago. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me? She asks suddenly. I think about the construction job I'd hated, about Uncle Greg's cruel dismissal at Christmas, about the determination that drove me to search when everyone else had given up. I don't think there was any other way it could have gone. I tell her honestly, I was always going to find you. She nods, understanding the truth of it, and I was always going to be found. As darkness falls, we sit in comfortable silence, 2 people who have seen the worst in humanity but somehow found their way back to hope. Not healed, not completely, there will always be scars, but free. And for now, for tonight, that's enough.